In this video, we'll be going over Python SOPs. So what is a Python SOP? A Python SOP is a node that you've created that runs Python code at every time step. This node will be stored inside of an OTL file, so it's very similar to a regular OTL. The difference is the way that it works when it's plugged into a node chain in Houdini. We'll see the way this works when we create one, so let's go ahead and make one real fast. If you go to File, New Operator Type, we'll need to specify a name and a label just like we do for normal OTLs. So if we call it something like experiment, label experiment. Make sure that you have Python type selected, not any of these other types. And then network type needs to be set to geometry operator. The rest of these network types are basically what they sound like. You can make a Python cop as well. You can make Python dops have an object operator that runs Python code. But what we want to look at is a geometry operator, which basically means that it's a SOP type. And then just like with other types of OTLs, we need to tell it where to save it. So if we go to this, you can call it something like experiment.otl, hit accept, and hit accept. And it brings up our edit type properties dialog. I'm just going to close this back down again, and let's just take a look at our new node. So it is a SOP, so we'll need to create a geometry node to contain it. So let's do that. And then if we go inside, I just want to delete the file node, and let's create a sphere. Change it to polygon. And let's just add a little bit more frequency so that we can see what's going on. Okay. So now let's just create our experiment node. Notice that it has the Python symbol by default as its icon. This means that it's a Python SOP. If we plug it in here and go ahead and display it, notice that nothing happens, and that's because this is an empty node. So the way that this works is if we right click and go back to type properties, let's bring this over. The type properties dialog is almost exactly the same as any other OTL. The difference is, if you notice, if we double click on this experiment node, there's actually nothing inside it. So it's not a subnet, it's just like a regular node. So if we go to the basic tab, you'll notice that most of these are actually grayed out. So for example, we can't set editable nodes because how would that even work? Alright, we can also set parameters in the same way that we can on other OTLs. So we could add, say, a color parameter, or maybe a string parameter for a group. So let's even just call this group, and this one group, and call this one color and color. So we have these, and then for group, we'll just call this star by default. Hit apply. And later we'll make these parameters actually do something. Alright, the rest of these tabs work exactly the same way that we're used to, so I'll not deal with them. The only tab that we need to look at that's new is this code tab. You'll notice that there's even some code in here by default. So basically what's happened here is Houdini has added in this code to give you a place to start, because most of the time when you're creating Python SOPs, you do need to get the geometry off the node. So we haven't actually talked about the geometry object yet, but we'll be looking at that later on in this week, but not in this video. In this video, let's just take a look at how this works. So basically, when you have this plugged in here, and Houdini is going from top to bottom, clicking each node, when it hits this node, it's going to run this code. So if we were to put UI.display message cooking Python SOP and hit apply, you can see that since we just hit apply, it cooked it, so there it is. If I were to unwire it and then wire it back in, it recooks it.